Hello, everyone. My name is Rhoda, and today I have here with me my teacher, Patrick. So, welcome, Patrick.
Oh, thank you.
Yes. So Patrick is the teacher and founder of All-Love Sekhem. And so I'm very honored to invite him today to have this recording so that more people can learn and understand about Sekhem.
Yes.
And can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into Sekhem and, you know?
Yes. Well, I would say that the Sekhem started with my pyramid experience.
Right, the Great Pyramid.
The Great Pyramid, yes. I was a Peace Corps volunteer in Yemen at the time. I'd been doing, my spiritual journey too. But one of the things that I really wanted to do was spend the night in the Great Pyramid.
Right.
Yeah.
And that was how long ago?
Well, that was back in 1980.
Wow, that's quite a long time ago.
Yeah. Back then, you still weren't really allowed to do certain things, but it made it a little more accessible to me.
Right. Yeah. So what happened there in the pyramid?
Well, my idea was I really wanted to spend the night there. And I was an architect at the time as well, and so I felt like I wanted to experience this pyramid energy.
Right. The mystical.
Yeah, I read a lot about it and actually had studied a lot about it before. So I had big curiosity to see what it's all about. And now I was a Peace Corps volunteer, so I didn't have a lot of money. It wasn't like I could pay off a few $1,000s to spend the night and that sort of thing.
Right.
But I was able to hide in the pyramid, and they locked me in.
Right. I don't think we can do that now, right? To hide in the pyramids.
No, they have the video cameras in there, and they're a little bit more strict.
Yeah.
But actually, I think knowing the process, I could probably still manage it.
Wow.
But
only with one, with yourself, not with a group, right?
Yeah. But the idea is that I hid, and then I came out, and then I had the whole place to myself for the whole night.
For the whole night.
Yeah.
Okay. So is this actually where you kind of got in contact with the Sekhem energy?
Well, I want to just say that the Sekhem energy, I know more about it now.
Okay.
And really, the Sekhem energy is something that we all have.
Okay, so it's something internal?
It's very much internal, but once you get to a certain level, there's no difference between internal and external.
Okay, please do tell us more.
Yeah, and really at the time, I didn't even know what the word Sekhem was. I was in the pyramid. I had an amazing experience with it, and then later on, after teaching for about 4 years,
right,
I finally began to understand it, and then the word Sekhem came to me.
Oh, so it didn't come to you right away?
No, it was later on. I started doing more energy work. I didn't have a name for what I was doing. And I just started to meditate, and the name Sekhem came to me.
I see.
Yeah.
Got it.
I also had a very good friend who was doing some channeling work at the time, and her name was Christian Gerber. She was also a very big help to encourage me and help this develop.
Right. Okay. And so you've been teaching Sekhem ever since then?
Yes.
Right. Yeah. So I understand that a lot of people actually link Sekhem with Egypt. Is that true?
Well, Sekhem is an Egyptian word.
Right.
And basically, the word Sekhem has a lot of different meanings. And it's interesting, because when you study it, basically the word came to me. I didn't even know it was Egyptian.
Oh,
when it came to me.
Right.
All right. But the word Sekhem has several meanings. The most common meaning would be power of powers.
Okay.
But if you study it, they also say, well, Osiris was the great Sekhem.
Osiris,
Yeah.
yes.
And so Osiris was really kind of the top god,
Yeah.
you know. And then if you look at it even further, the Sekhem is also referred to as a place. Mm-hmm. So it's a place that the gods are born from.
Ah, okay.
But also, Sekhem is used sometimes as a pronoun in a way where you would say, Your Highness.
Okay.
Okay. This just to show that it's a higher vibration, high vibration.
Right.
Okay. So there's many different meanings with it. It can also mean, sometimes they call the black coal Sekhem.
Okay.
And that is the blackness. So in a way, it's kind of getting all the way back to source if you look at it in that regard. So it's going back to the source energy, going back all the way.
Right.
And it's a very old ancient word. So it was appropriate to use the word Sekhem.
Right. Got it. So Sekhem is actually, would you say that the energy of Sekhem is actually more ancient than when the time you actually interact with it in the pyramid?
Well, really what you want to do is you want to look at this sort of, when you're doing energy work, it's an eternal, timeless type energy.
Right.
Okay? So, and really you're just putting a word on source energy, you know?
Okay.
So we use, you know, and I know you guys like to use the word source energy. I like Sekhem, you know, as well, and I exchange those words around. Now you could say use the word God, okay, but as soon as you say God, then there's all kinds of other connotations, you know, because of the language.
Right, that is true.
So if you have God, then people say, well, what about goddess? You know, because God is more of a masculine tense. Sekhem's the same.
Okay.
Which I found to be very interesting. A lot of times people working with Sekhem, they say, oh, it's a feminine energy.
Right.
But if you look at the word itself, and if you really understood the Egyptian language, Sekhem is either neuter or masculine.
Okay.
And then there's also a lot of focus on Sekhmet.
Yes, that's the question I want to ask next too.
Yeah, and again, you're getting into form goddesses, god or goddess, and you're starting to get it into duality and form.
Right.
So actually, Sekhmet is the feminine word for Sekhem.
I see.
So if you in the Egyptian language, if you want to make something feminine, you put iti at the end.
Okay.
So it's so simple.
So that's actually one of the reasons why some people link Sekhem energy with Sekhmet.
Yes. Yeah. So they'll say, oh, the Sekhmet is the guardian of Sekhem. But if you do any kind of real research, I mean, you know, real research, you could just take Google and type in and type in Sekhem, and you can start to get things. Now, what I would do is I would get like the Tibetan, the Egyptian Book of the Dead.
Okay.
Okay. And I'd get the PDF form and just say, okay, where does Sekhem come up in the book?
Okay.
And it's interesting. It's all about Osiris.
Oh.
You know, you won't see in an ancient form many references to Sekhmet.
Right. Only because nowadays people somehow linked it to Sekhem and Sekhmet together.
Yeah, that's because what was going on was a lot of the times people would connect to the energy, and then they would have a vision.
Right, an inner vision.
Yeah, an internal vision. Now, it was interesting. Some people in the beginning started seeing Kuan Yin.
Right.
Some people would see Isis.
Okay.
And some people would see Sekhmet.
Right.
And what ended up transpiring from that then was that they would create their own Sekhem system based on their own visions.
I see.
And most of it was all feminine.
Okay.
You know,
right.
poor Horus, poor Ra, you know, the masculine gods, they just
kind of disappeared.
They disappeared, yeah. Mostly because nowadays they kind of want to, you know, you've got this scale, you know, where things are masculine, and then nowadays it's like, let's get it back to balance. But then when you try to balance it out, you go the other direction.
Right, you kind of overbalance it first, right.
And in reality, when you're working really with, might say, higher vibration energies, there's no duality anyway.
True.
So the way that people want to define things as masculine and feminine, and that is keeping it on a lower level. You're still dealing with duality.
Right. Got it. Okay. So now we understand a bit more about the history of Sekhem.
Yeah.
Can you actually tell us how Sekhem energy works? Because one reason is there's actually also many types of Sekhem out there.
Yeah.
Some with symbols, some says it's such a high vibration that you have to have Reiki before you can go into Sekhem. And I've been asked a lot of questions as well.
Yeah, there's, and really I have to say, I can probably tell you more about all this stuff than anybody because I've been following it for 50 years.
Right,
you know?
Exactly. So that's why we have Patrick here today.
and I know the people that introduce these things. So I've met with them, I've talked with them, discussed it with them. And really what happened in the beginning was that when I first introduced Sekhem, I didn't even know how to spell the word.
Okay.
Okay, because
it just came to you.
It came to me through sound.
And we don't have Google back then, right?
Yeah, no. And so there were several spellings. So the first spelling was kind of like an Seichim spelling.
Okay, right.
And then as soon as I started to do a little research and found the Sekhem the Egyptian connection to the word, that would be Sekhem.
Right.
And then at one point, because there were so many people spelling it different ways, and you know, like for instance, in Portuguese, an E is an I.
Okay.
So you would switch it.
Right.
So instead of having the E there, you would have an I. So there were different ways of pronunciation.
Okay.
So like if you were Portuguese and you looked at the Sekhem spelling, it would be Sekhem, you know,
with the I.
Yeah, and so there was just a lot of confusion because of the way different languages would spell it. So therefore, many different spellings would come out.
Okay, got it.
So what I thought would be a good way to bring all these people together would just say, let's just spell it the way the Egyptians would actually spell it.
Fair enough, yes.
And that would be just use the consonants. So you'd have Sekhem.
Oh, okay.
And that would eliminate
the
all
E and the I's.
this controversy on how to spell it properly. And I thought that would really work. But what ended up happening is that people didn't get it. And they'd say, well, I do Sekhem.
That's how they can spell it.
Yeah. It's just like I practice Sekhem. You know, it's kind of like, what? You know, no. When you see it, you're supposed to say Sekhem.
Okay, they didn't know about it.
No, and again, it's kind of a marketing thing. So eventually, what I did was to just say, okay. Let me go back to kind of the Egyptian spelling, which is the Sekhem spelling.
Right.
And then I also added all-love. So, because there's a lot of people out there who are started to teach Sekhem.
Right.
And some of them have I can't say no connection to me, but they've never studied with me.
Okay.
And this is important to understand. Is that they've been teaching Sekhem maybe for many years, but they were doing it in a method that maybe I taught 40 years ago.
Right.
You know?
Right.
And they haven't upgraded. You might say they haven't taken any upgrade.
Ever since.
Yeah, ever since. And they're happy with that. Mm-hmm. And that's okay, you know, because Sekhem, you know, it's good. You know, what we taught originally, it was a very good way.
Yes.
And then, of course, you mentioned the way how, you know, some people like to use the symbols.
Yes.
So what began to happen is that because Reiki was so symbol-based,
yes,
you know, then what ended up happening was that people would say, okay, I'm going to do the Reiki first and do the Reiki symbols, and then we're going to add Sekhem.
Okay.
And so Reiki would be level 1, 2, and 3.
Yes.
And Sekhem 4, 5, 6, and 7.
Right.
So it's kind of a marketing package deal.
Together. Uh-huh.
And I really wasn't in favor of this at all. You know, it's kind of like, come on, guys, what are you doing?
Yeah. Yeah.
And this is where a lot of, you might say, the separation went.
Okay.
So there are a lot of people out there. What they do is they're teaching it how I would call the Reiki template.
Yes, with the symbols.
With the symbols, yes. And I went into another direction because what I found is that if you could really come in and open your heart and work with the love energy, that initiations were much deeper, much more powerful, and more permanent.
Right.
And they would be what I would consider a real initiation.
I see. So this is actually one of the main differences you see between different Sekhems out there.
Yeah.
Yeah. But most of the Sekhem teachers, even though they might not have learned it directly from you, because they might have learned from other teachers, but would you say that their teachers also kind of somewhere along the lineage or along the line kind of learn it from you here and there, or?
Well, now I would say that I'll just say 99% of the people teaching Sekhem have a connection to me.
I see.
Okay, so like I started, I introduced it, then they would start teaching Sekhem from either one of my teachers or from me.
Right.
Okay, because traditionally, and this is where there's some confusion, a lot of people say that Sekhem was a healing system.
Yes, that's what you read on the internet.
Exactly. You get on the internet, they say it was a healing system started in Egypt.
Exactly.
Taught by the ancient Egyptians, and they have the healing system.
Yes.
This is not correct.
Okay.
This is pure marketing.
Got it.
Okay. Sekhem, if you look, was never used in that term as a healing system. I was probably the first one to introduce Sekhem as a healing system.
Right.
Okay? And then people took that and started creating a lot of stories around it. Okay.
To make it sound better.
And I can honestly say, all the research I've done, I have never found any ancient text which talks about Sekhem as a healing system.
Got it.
It's always as this kind of place the gods were born, relating more to source.
Right.
Okay?